action. Hey, y'all. We're live. And greetings to everybody out there, everywhere. Thank you so much, as always, for making the time. Oh, I see you, Brother Demarcus, up in the hair. Y'all, check out Brother Demarcus's new publication. I'm going to pin it in a second to the Jumbotron. But shout out to everybody here, Sister Helena, Sister Dr. Day. We got Sister Idil here, Dr. Idil. We got Denise, shout out. And of course, my amazing co hosts, Brother Freddy and Brother Brian, who just joined out of love this morning. He could be resting, he's really busy doing amazing things, mentally divine. You want to check out that podcast. He's just doing outstanding work, and I'm really proud of him. And I just can't wait to hear what he has to add to the conversation. So, just to give a background, we always level set. That's what we do up in here. I am your host, as always, Dr. Ijama Nadim Opara, she, her, and all are my pronouns, or is Igbo for they. And I'm calling in from the original unceded lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Odawa, Botawa, Tomi, the Three Fires people, baby, in the territory of Wawiyetanon, which is also known as Detroit. 313. And I recognize and honor my Igbo African and African diaspora ancestors, communities, and descendants as well. I am a physician, scholar, scientist, artist, activist, coach, consultant, speaker, mama, and wifey. And my personal, professional, and business mission in life, same as this space that I'm in at Roundtable, is to dismantle white supremacist delusions, aka white violence, aka white terrorism, by eliminating anti-Black racism from medicine, healthcare, public health, and the sciences, all while centering Black brilliance, Black abundance, Black joy, locally and globally. So again, thank you for taking the time to be here. You could be anywhere, but you're here at the AIMART, which is Anti-Racism in Medicine Action Roundtable. We are multi-professional, that is transdisciplinary, meaning we cut across all sectors, disciplines, professions, and backgrounds. So Brother Brian, that's why you welcome here. Don't even play with that. I'm not a doctor. I don't want to hear that mess. Okay. All right. We are a community of all of us where we bring all our genius to the table, baby. Okay. Because it takes everything, right? It takes all of us. And our grounding philosophy is Ubuntu, right? I am because we are, family, community. Okay, so whether you're a doctor, teacher, bus driver, social scientist, community member, whatever, right? Y'all got the GSD degree. We talk about that GSD degree, getting shit done. Okay, so that's what, how come we here. And we are Pan-African, we are Afrocentric and Afro-optimist, and we are unapologetically pro-Black. So we center, Black magic, Black brilliance, excellence, truth, joy, strength, assets, abundance, possibilities, creativity, and future dreaming. And we are collectively committed to developing the innovative knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed to inform transformative actions towards eliminating anti-Black racism in medicine, healthcare, public health, and the sciences. And we know that it takes this is a multifactorial, like tentacle thing. So it don't matter where in society or whatever is happening, it affects health and health outcomes. Health touches everything. So whether it's in the schools, like Brother DeMarcus's work addressed, whether it's in music and pop culture, like we've addressed many times, as we had explored internalized anti-Blackness on this space, as we did a couple of weeks ago, whether it's in whatever your field is, it impacts health. And so we are here to connect those dots and show how it all connects. So for those who are new, we meet every 1 to 2 weeks on a Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. We will love you. This is a community. So listen, you got a topic you care about. I know, Dr. Pascal, I need to connect with you in a bit, because I know you raised some topics and that you want to talk about. Let's talk about it. Let's get our speakers together and let's unpack and do the do. So this is your community. Okay. Welcome. Shout out to Sister Mary Denise. There is so much for us to work. There's more than enough work for us. So honey, this is your space. What you want to talk about, what you want to unpack, what you want to organize around, bring it to the community, and we will make it happen. Okay, so important. Every 1 to 2 Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and we certainly stay in touch with each other throughout. Follow each other, everybody in this space. Okay, I also want to shout out our partners because, again, Ubuntu, I am because we are. So, Brother Sinker Skinner of iloveblackpeople.com, Howard University, Sirius FM. Want to shout out Canada US Coalition to End Race Correction in Healthcare with my sister Lana James, who will be returning from sabbatical next month by the grace of God and our ancestors. Okay. Whoo, child, I've missed her so bad. Black Dog Village, National Residence Council, Ubuntu Family Black Family Health Center, Hood Medicine Initiative, Black Mental Health Alliance of Nashville, Health Equity and Justice in Medicine of Wayne State, and Opara Speaks, my company. All shout out great partners to make this roundtable work. Okay. All right. So we're about to jump into the topic for today. Real quick, reminder, we are a Jumbotron family. We be posting the resources, baby. We ground what we're talking about in facts and references. We cite our sources, baby. And so as we have the conversations, you'll be seeing all kinds of resources and directions pop up on the Jumbotron, otherwise known as the dashboard, otherwise known as the nest. Okay, so be paying attention. And if you have resources, please share. All right, feel free to DM me on the back channel. Or if you come up as a speaker, feel free to post, all right, so that we can share and build community that way. All right, so the first thing I'll be posting in a minute while our wonderful speakers are speaking are links to our website. It's a temporary website. We're building up the glorious version, but right now it's important to just have a presence. So we have that, and shout out to Brother Benny of Black Mental Health Alliance of Nashville for getting us started with that. Pardon me, and our YouTube channel link if you want to jump on the YouTube and see our beautiful faces. Yeah. We're also on Twitter Live and Facebook Live. So, we're on all the platforms we can possibly be for just to give you options. I know people love the podcast feel and listening on Twitter Space. That's what's up. If you want to just look at some beautiful brown faces talking, yeah, you got options for that too. Okay. All right. So those links will be going up soon. Please feel free to tweet, invite people in this space. We like to say, bring in your mama, your daddy, your exes, your haters, your lovers, your friends, your neighbors, that dude from preschool. Invite all of them into the space. Shout out to Dr. Michelle Drew. I see your beautiful face. I missed you. They put you in Twitter jail. We're going to talk about that in a second. Whatever we got to do to bail you out, baby. We can't be having people threaten your freedom like that. I don't care if it's Twitter. All right. Musky Twitter, like brother Michael Harriet said. And if y'all haven't checked out that thread, you need to, because it is just too much. It is everything. So make sure you are tagging and tweeting and inviting your people into the space. Hashtag AMART, okay? So we can, trend up in here, let people know that we are here. Again, if you got questions, comments, resources, if the tech isn't working, we've had tech issues in the past, DM me, please. I'll be paying attention. And we always like to celebrate. Okay, like we just shouted out, Brother DeMarcus, you got an accomplishment. You have something you published, something you just did, or something even you're selling, your book, your whatever. Go ahead and let us know so we can put it on the Jumbotron and celebrate each other. That's what community is all about. Okay, so go ahead and let us know about that. All right. So again, hashtag AMART. Feel free to put, populate the chat, our thread, our space thread, which is right at the bottom right. That little speech bubble icon for you there. And y'all on YouTube, go ahead and put what you got to say on the comments. Always happy to tag that, and I'll be paying attention so we can answer questions that way if you don't want to come up to speak and all that good stuff. Okay. So now with that being said, now we got that out of the way. Let me go ahead and take a swig of water. Oh God. Lubricate my throat for a second before we get into what we're about to get into, because what we're about to get into is all the things. So you saw the topic. We fall down, but we get up, right? Oh yeah. Anti-Blackness, substance use and recovery through the lens of abolition. So let me set the stage, just create the background like we usually do before we hear from the phenomenal, the one, the only Mr. Freddy Shegog himself. So listen, the APA, that's the American Psychiatric Association, defines substance use disorder as involving the presence of clinically significant impairment and distress caused by the recurrent use of alcohol and or drugs. All right. We know that it remains a growing public health crisis in the United States and, frankly, around the world. And many experts list it as the number one health problem in this country. However, because we live in a nation stubbornly rooted in white supremacist delusion, blatant disparities exist in both the experience of addiction and substance use disorder and treatment. Compared to white individuals, Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks are disproportionately vulnerable to negative consequences associated with substance misuse, such as involvement with the criminal justice system, greater morbidity and disability, violence, and death. Right. And despite these accentuated consequences, Black and Brown individuals in particular are found to have greater barriers to accessing, completing, and having satisfactory experiences within substance use treatment than white folks. The mental and behavioral health system itself a part and parcel of a holistically anti-Black structure, culture, ideology, norms, practices, and processes, and baked inside of white supremacism, systemically excludes Black folks from creating and exacerbating I'm sorry, it systemically excludes Black folks from care, right? By creating and exacerbating impediments and barriers. All the while refusing to highlight how structural, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized anti-Black racism and the stress, baby, the chronic, toxic, traumatic stress of surviving white terrorism and anti-Blackness intergenerationally and within this very generation affects our mental health and behavioral health and contributes to substance use and addiction as well as our recovery experiences. Not too long ago, 2018, a study showed that only 18% of people identified as needing treatment for substance use disorder actually got it. Now, when we break it down and disaggregate, this gap is greater for those of us that are minoritized, for those of us that are excluded, for those that are intentionally disenfranchised. So for Black and Latinx groups in the US, 90 and 92% of the folks diagnosed with a substance use disorder did not receive treatment. Another study showed that Black patients are 70% less likely to receive a prescription for buprenorphine or Suboxone. Many of you know that's a treatment for opiate use disorder at their visit when controlling for payment method, sex, and age, meaning regardless of their income status, regardless of how old they were, regardless of the male or female, man or woman, regardless of their insurance coverage, baby, these family members were not prescribed Suboxone for their opiate use disorder. Another study of privately insured people who suffered an overdose and were treated in an emergency department found that Black patients were half as likely to obtain treatment following overdose compared to their white counterparts. And now we talk about intersectionality with law and policy, criminality. So we got numerous studies that have shown that despite uniform rates of substance use between racial and ethnic populations, there is a disproportionate rate of drug arrests for Black Americans. So for example, we have studies from cannabis. So cannabis use is equally prevalent between Black and white folks, yet Black people are almost 4 times as likely to be arrested for possession. And you can multiply this across other substances. And know that this sits on the back of policies like the 1914 Harrison Narcotic Tax Act, President Lyndon Johnson's war on crime in the 60s, the Nixon's war on drugs in the 70s, Ronald Reagan's Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, and the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 86, and the list goes on. So the case for how anti-Blackness impacts substance use and treatment for recovery is clear. And we're going to unpack it with our beloved, phenomenal brother Freddy Shegog, while we're going to also talk about how can we look at this issue through the lens of anti-racism and abolition. So let's get into it. Brother, you are welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Brother Freddy is a fantastic speaker, a phenomenal just agent of change and advocate, and just an inspirational, motivational icon in our community. Brother, go ahead and share with the people your work, what you do, and the divinity that you are.
Wow. Can Can you hear me on the
Brother,
Twitter?
unmute your phone. I'm gonna unmute your phone. Yes, and also your, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me on stream? Yeah, now I am. Okay. All right. Good. All right. So let me get into all this. First of all, thank you for having me. Bless you. I'm beyond grateful. Um, it's just always a humbling thing when anybody asks you to share your experience and your wisdom and how this country is so built wrong. Um, it's funny, right? Like I started this company from nothing. So I am the founder and CEO of the Message LLC. I travel the country and I share my story and I do workshops on mental health and substance use disorder. Okay. That's the educational theoretical version of it. Basically, I go around this country telling folks, listen, this is what happened to me. This is what's wrong with our system. And this is what we need to do to change it to make it better for the people coming behind me. There's too many people that look like me that are struggling financially, mentally, physically, and especially with the drugs and alcohol problem. I mean, it's criminal all around. No matter how you look at this, no matter what you break down, no matter how you do it. My first experience with the system, I was 9 years old. I was getting high off my asthma inhaler. I was having suicidal ideation. And we'll get into that about how I got introduced to it. But I just want to start off with I'm just very blessed to be here. I'm very blessed to know you. I thank you for who you are, what you do. Thank you for everybody that's on this panel today. Thank you for the work that you do. It definitely takes a village to change these ideologies, policies, the way they do things. Like the, let me put it like this: it's not an accident we're here. All that we're seeing and all that we're going through and all that we're dealing with, it was meant to be like this. It was meant to keep us down. It was meant for the systems to be this way. So yeah, that's what I do. I travel the country. I'm in grad school right now for my MPA. I'm at Westchester University where I just graduated by God's grace and mercy, summa cum laude. I was selected the commencement speaker. I'm currently, Temple's doing a documentary on my life as we speak. That will be out. I'm writing my first book. It's called God and Grind. It's my story. I was just in the Chronicle of Higher Education. I was a featured publication story in there. It was the longest feature published that the senior writer had ever wrote. I was just in there inside higher ed. I mean, I just got blessings going on. I just got blessings going on. But the bottom line is the blessings that I have is making sure, as my one great sister says, lift as I climb. You know what I mean? When I first started this, it was like, all right, I got to feed my family. Well, now I remember my mom telling me, okay, Freddie, you can make money, but much is given, much is required. This is about making sure you open up the door and change policies. So now I don't want just money. I want policy change, because the idea is, if I get in heaven, that don't matter if everybody else is struggling. It's not just about me. I'm trying to make sure that everybody else has a seat at the table and can make their thing. So that's Freddie. Let's get into this and let's do what we got to do, because I'm hungry to start talking greasy about this greasy system.
He said greasy. He said, I'm hungry to start talking about this greasy ass system. Look, listen, we've got to get into the grease, the fat, all the good stuff. I got brother Brian here. And first of all, shout out to you, Freddie. You just are so inspirational. And when people hear your story, they will understand this intro you just gave, how much more powerful it is, because of what you're about to break down for us. And I'm so proud of you. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on almost getting done with your degree. Congratulations on the documentary coming out about your life. I can't wait to read and watch both these things, and continue to participate in all the excellence that you are. I want to just bring in brother Brian, who is just amazing. This is truly my brother, just a personification of love. That's all. I mean, if I was just to break everything down, is a personification of love. And I appreciate this brother for being the icon that he is in the community and the work that he's doing and trying to do. And he doesn't have to do this, but he chooses to do what he does as mentally divine. Brother Brian, go ahead and let the people know the excellence that you are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Opara. Freddie, first and foremost, let me just uplift you and amplify kind of your message, right? Like you're telling us a personal story and the anecdotal experience that then ties into your kind of professional experience and how you're bringing such great, I would say amplification and just uplifting this message of trying to break down the systems of oppression that continue to plague our people. So I just wanted to kind of give you that grace. For me, I like to situate myself from a place of kind of my professional perspective. I always tell Dr. Opar, but you always try to bring me down from just like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're a medical professional or not, you're doing work in different ways. So I know that education is up there pinged. For folks who may not be familiar with my platform, I got my bachelor's in political science. I also got my master's in education. I work in higher education as a scholar practitioner through the residential housing perspective, right? So I supervise an apartment complex, but part of that is overseeing staff that directly interface with students between the ages of 18 to 24, even sometimes a little older if they're non-traditional students. I think the importance of that is to make sure that we, continue to destigmatize mental health resources. That's one kind of a sliver of the work that I do, considering the fact that, students in the higher education setting go through so much from an academic sense, from a personal sense, from a financial sense. And I think sometimes because students are students, people forget that they are actually people who go through and deal with some of the things that life has to throw at us. And so, we have to support, and considering the fact that we have very, particularly here at my university, we have a very big international student population and minoritized groups that are on campus that are most vulnerable. I like to look at it from a cultural perspective and seeing how it's so important to destigmatize these resources, because we don't talk about these resources in our communities, right? We don't, and even people in other communities that may not be of mine. I know that minoritized, marginalized populations don't talk about these with their families, don't talk about it sometimes with their clergy because of their faith, because of their religion. And sometimes they just sweep it under the rug. So from my perspective, I have many different kind of interactions, engagements with students where we're consistently having the conversation to go and see their psychological resources on campus, right? Go see the mental health experts to have conversations and breaking down those barriers. So for me, that's what I do in my day-to-day. But then outside of that, I'm very big into politics and commentating politically, because I think it's very important from a policy perspective that we do it not only at the federal level, but also at the local level. And so a lot of my work recently has been trying to get Stacey Abrams elected here in because, like, for instance, she wants to expand Medicare and Medicaid, which will expand mental health resources for our communities, right? So just kind of want to situate myself in there, and then hopefully I can add some additional insight into this conversation. But Dr. Opara, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you for thank you for your generosity of time and the way you just responded at the shortest possible minute. And I want to shout out to everybody out there, whether in this space or not, that does work in this space. There are so many Black folks that are leading the work of, abolition centered substance use recovery program and treatment, mental health care, behavioral health care, and there's so many of them. And I'm posting some links as we speak to just kind of shout out a few. And thank you to all the people that also shared some resources for me and directed me, and I made some great connections. They weren't available today, but I have made some amazing connections for future collaborations. So that's what community is. That's what Ubuntu is. And so I just want to shout out to just all the folks in this space. I hope to hear from you and outside space, just to lift up their work, because they are doing amazing work over many, many years. Thank you, Brother Brian. You're outstanding. So Brother Freddie, let's get into it. Just let's start with your story, just like a brief sort of rendering of your fabulous story. as it relates to substance use, mental health, recovery treatment. Just in about 2-3 minutes or so, level set for us where you're coming from and how this has informed the work that you're doing today.
Okay, thank you. So let me tell you how this starts. I always get asked, Freddie, what drug of choice did you go to rehab for? Here's your answer: more. It's real simple. I have a brain that whenever I do something, I like it, I do it excessive. It like we make this theoretically too much. It's that simple. Where did this start? It started at 9 years old. Ooh, hold on. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. That's all right. That's all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's what we do. That's what we do. We adjust. All right. So this started at 9 years old. My mom worked in treatment. Now, I need to be clear about this. I've been blessed with a mother that went to treatment once for 5 days, and by God's grace and mercy, she never relapsed. She celebrates 30 years in September. Okay. So I grew up with a mother that worked in a treatment facility, and she was a member of 12 Fellowship, and that's how I grew up. All right. Single parent home, mother of color, love her to death, beast, taught me everything I know, graduated from Cheney, animal. All right. So here's what goes on. At 9 years old, she has great insurance. And we know with the healthcare system, you have great insurance, you don't get treated well. What they do is they're script writers. That's what I've seen when you have great insurance. So they give her the prescription for Ventolin and Vanseril. She brings it home. It was the blue bag. I take it. I really liked it. I knew when she left that room, I was going to get high off this asthma inhaler. Dr. Ashley's on her. God bless her. She's a wonderful, great human being. She'll definitely know what I'm talking about because she's a pharmacist and she's one of the best there is, period. Anyway, they give me Ventolin and Vanseril, right? And I take it and I like it and I start getting high. So for about years, I'm getting high on Ventolin and Vanseril. All right. End up at the treatment facility at the psych unit at 9 years old after getting high, suicidal ideation. My mom finds out. Of course, they treat her bad because they want to know why a single parent woman of color don't know what's going on in her home. And they automatically think that she's beating on me, which she's not. She's working hard trying to provide because the wealth gap in this country, if you're born, I didn't know this, but the social determinants of health have taught me, statistics in grad school have taught me, if you're born a certain color and a certain economic situation, your life is probably already statistically planned out. Okay, so I end up in my first psych unit at 9 years old. Okay, so imagine what that does to me. And my first introduction to the system, I'll never forget it. The psychiatrist that was on duty at the emergency room said to me, what is wrong with you? Why would you get high for asthma inhaler? Hello, you don't want to think I already feel bad? Now, meanwhile, I'm getting bullied. I got sexual trauma going on in my background. It's a response. Me getting high of my asthma inhalers is a response to what's going on with me. But there's things going on in my home and people are human. But it's highlighted more because we're Black. Okay, so I ended up in my first psych unit. And I always say this to people about mental health and drug addiction. And I heard this, and I think it's really good. They always say what's wrong with you, but never what happened to you. Nobody ever asked that question. It's always, why are you getting high? What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. But they never ask, what happened to you? What is this in response to? I didn't even know what trauma and PTSD was until years after I got sober. Every time I'd be around a dumpster smelling it, I would get real nervous. And I didn't realize that was PTSD. I had no idea. All right. Long story short, I end up picking up drugs and alcohol around 16 years old. That leads me to 30 some odd treatment centers that I can remember, 15 some odd psych units. And 6.5 years ago, I end up downtown homeless, dumpster diving, begging for change. I remember a white lady, because I have to tell this, don't know her name, but I'm just telling you the story. I developed this plan to dig, to beg for change outside the Ritz-Carlton, because I thought if I was by the Ritz, they would give me money. The people that gave me money when I was when I was homeless and panhandling? It was a single parent woman of color with her last 20 with her 3 kids at the bus stop waiting that would pray for me and give me money. Okay. So I'm by the Ritz-Carlton and a woman, I asked her, for change. I said, I'm having a bad day. She spits on me and tells me to get a job, nigger. Never forget it. I'm thankful to that woman because her doing that taught me that this is why I can never use drugs and alcohol, because it can put me in a position like this. But it also told me how disgusting this world can be. I enter treatment. I go to treatment for 78 days. We'll get into that. It was an all-white facility. The only people I seen there, people of color, were the pastor, the janitor, and the cafeteria worker. It looked like a modern-day plantation. We're good enough to cook for you. We're good enough to pray for you. We're good enough to hire you for tech, but we're not good enough to put you in administrative roles. We're not good enough to put you in counselor roles. We're not good enough to put you in psychiatry roles. It's blatant racism in these treatments, like blatant, like they're not even hiding it. Okay, but we will take the check from your insurance to have you in there as a patient. All right, so I get out of treatment. I enroll back in school. This is my seventh school I enrolled back into. I wasn't going to go back. My wife said, you're going to go. I end up going. My first paper gets published in the Philadelphia Inquirer. I start getting calls from schools. Before I know it, I'm traveling the country, speaking nationally as a national keynote. I graduate college, and now I have 7 years sobriety in June, and that's the story.
Go ahead and mute. Oh, wow. Wow. Listen, and I know I can, I mean, and thank you for packing it. What is, I think, 7 lifetimes, okay, into a few minutes, which is not fair, but I'm just giving us a taste of the depth of your experience. And I want to thank you for just honoring us with that. Oh man, Freddie, there was so much in there. The piece around the trauma, the fact that you started early, and then you talked about the intersectionality, that there are multiple pieces to this trauma, you seeking relief from a soul pain, through inhaling your asthma medication. Wasn't because you were bored. You had sexual trauma. You had the trauma of living in poverty. Frankly, you have the trauma of living with a single mom who herself was dealing with substance use recovery and mental health issues. Okay, there were multiple what we call ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences and stressors that you were exposed to. And the fact that the question that was asked of you, what's wrong with you? And that is such a commentary for us in the institutions that we find ourselves. What are the questions that we're asking the people we're supposed to serve and take care of? And I can tell you as a physician and someone also who does work in the community in research and in everything, advocacy and activism and all organizing and practice and all that good stuff, education, that we are still trained and oriented to see the problem in the person surviving the injury. We don't look to the structures and systems, the norms, culture, ideology, the processes and practices, which we are also part of, which we contribute to, benefit from, and produce as well as reinforce and reproduce, right? For the fixing. The fixing is always, well, how do we educate the hell out of the community? How do we tell the community how to act? How do we do this to the community, to the patient, to the client, to the customer, to the them? It's not us. It's not the system. No, it's them, right? And so the question becomes, well, what's wrong with you? So that what? I can fix it. Now, what happened to you? Or even more specifically, what did we do to you? And so that is just, just so many layers. And then you mentioned the social determinants of health. And for those who don't know, social determinants are those conditions in which we live, work, pray, die, worship. It's housing, education. It's the justice system, healthcare. It's your early childhood experiences. It's food, okay? And the list goes on, right? And talking about how those things intersect with each other. Right. We know that there's a huge association between, substance use and substance use disorder and lack of housing and lack of education and unemployment and being having been incarcerated, and the list goes on. And so when we are viewing this subject through absent those pieces, we are incomplete and therefore doing a huge disservice. And we know that, again, that those pieces, those social determinants of health, are opportunities and resources that are informed by structural racism. Right. And the last thing I want to comment on before I move to Brother Brian is, I love that you said it was a plantation there. And I think many of us exist in spaces that we could describe as plantations. We can clearly see that the people that hold the power, those people that are in the C-suite, do not look like the people doing the work on the front line at all. And it shows. It shows in the outcomes. It is no mistake. I love what you said. You said, look, these systems are operating. That's why I correct people when they say the system is broken. The system is not broken. It is functioning fine. This is what it was designed to do. Period. It's not broken. It is functioning. It is no mistake that the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, notes that 86% of psychologists are whites. 70% of social workers are whites. 88% of mental health counselors are whites. These things don't happen by magic. They are intentionally produced. And so I just really want to appreciate the way in that succinct story, and we'll talk about the recovery piece in a bit, but just unpacking that early part, you have unfolded the individual community level, individual level, policy, institutional, and systemic level, so vertically, but also horizontally across the various issues, the ACEs, social determinants of health, the challenge around diversity and representation that is again intentionally produced, all of this that constitutes the disparate experiences that our communities experience when it comes to substance use disorder and mental health, as well as when it comes to even trying to get the treatment and recovery. Brother Brian, what in Freddy's story touched you? And I really love that you do multi-level work, and in a lot of what you spoke about, you also broke it down to stigma and other pieces as it relates to the individual community level. And then you also talked about policy. Shout out to Sister Stacey Abrams. We are doing everything we can in Michigan to support y'all down there in Georgia. For the next Georgia Governor Stacey Abrams, hello. And so and really helping us again connect the dots. That's why I said, right, in this space we talk about everything, because health touches everything. In politics and policy, Medicare was the policy that did the most when it came to integrating healthcare systems. Hospitals were segregated for the longest because of hashtag Jim Crow, right? The one policy that integrated that mama jamma in literally overnight was Medicare, because the government said you will not get this money if you don't serve Negroes. So the power of policy cannot be overestimated, and who gets in those positions to make those policies and those decisions is very critical. So yes, to everything that you said, and that multi-level. And so as I was thinking about that, I referenced in our introduction, right, some examples of the policies that led us to where we are. As far back as 1914, the Harrison Act, right? The Narcotic Act, the Drug Anti-Abuse Act in the 80s, and of course Nixon with his goddamn war on drugs, right? And I want to read to everybody an excerpt of what Nixon said in terms of the backing, the reasons and rationale behind his war on drugs, which we are still feeling that consequence today. I want to read this because you can't get more explicit than this. You just can't. And then, Brother Brian, I'd like to invite your reflection on this, what I just outlined, and also what hit you when you listen to Brother Freddy. And so this guy, John Ehrlichman, he's known as the Watergate conspirator. He talked about Nixon's, anti-black and anti quote unquote hippie, right, rationale to support the war on drugs. And so I quote, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and Black people. The anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We know we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or be Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Black people with heroin, and then criminalizing the fuck out of both of them, my words, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did. End quote. Brother Brian, how does this hit you?
I mean, there's a lot there. So, Dr. O'Para, so let me start off by what Freddy shared, and then I'll do reflections on that. So, Freddy's story, I mean, what I can appreciate is that, you shared the story about how you started at the age of 9, right? And this is, again, your social determinants, the fact that your mom was a single mom, trying to go through it as well, and actually, fighting her own kind of addiction. And, I think it really breaks down the barriers that people consider to be addicts, right? Because I think people think that, these are just people who are older people, homeless people who just don't want to do anything in life and just want to just be on the streets. And so to think about that perspective of, these stories that are the untold stories, right? The people who started when they were very young were, and that creates the breaking the barrier. I mean, there's people who were had a sports injury, and again, never touched drugs in a day in their lives, and it's kind of the same concept where they get a shot of something, and that they start getting addicted to it, right? And that is something that we need to talk about more, considering the fact that there is such a specific stereotype. There's a specific kind of image of someone who is an addict. So I really appreciate that story. I love how you talked about the social determinants as an indicator for how people's lives are really shaped out. And Dr. Opara, you touched on that as well. This is not something that happens by happenstance. It's not something that happens by coincidence, right? This is something that happens on purpose. The system is working just fine because it is doing what it was created to do.
Right.
It was created to continue to oppress, marginalized and minoritized individuals. And it's doing that now, and we're seeing the long-lasting effects. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that, from a microcosm perspective of, let's say, politics and policy, when we think about that perspective of like, what is wrong with you as a person versus critiquing the social structures that have been created in place to put people into these kind of spaces. What we call it in education, in theory, we call it the deficit mindset, right? The deficit perspective. And so what we have to do is we have to have an anti-deficit framework of thinking, what we do is we look at, again, what we're saying, the structures. We don't look at the students and say, well, why is it that you're not excelling in these courses? Why is it that you aren't paying your term bill? Let's talk about the other side. Why is it the tuition is too expensive? Why is it that we're not offering the financial aid necessary to ensure that you're getting the opportunity, the equitable opportunity for access? And so it's important. So yes, you're absolutely correct when you say that all of this ties in together, because I see those examples in so many different facets. So they just say that, but then talking about the guy, I forget his name, the guy that you were just talking about from Nixon's cabinet, who was talking about the fact that they absolutely knew what they were doing when they said, when they had people on the news and they had Black people being handcuffed on the nightly news every single day, they knew that the power of the media was going to create a narrative and strengthen the narrative that Black people are scary, Black people are addicts, Black people are thugs, Black people have to be contained, and it continued to fuel racism. This war on drugs, this ideology that you are soft on crime, really magnified this mentality of we have to be strong on crime. But being strong on crime did not mean let's stop gun violence. It did not mean let's stop crime from happening. It meant let's lock up Black people. It meant mass incarceration. It meant prison industrial complex. It meant prison to school, school to prison pipeline. It meant all of these things. And I think what people need to understand, I think, when we have the conversations, even in the education sector, when we say these people are trying to ban books, these people are trying to ensure that critical race theory isn't being taught. They don't even know what critical race theory is,
right,
by the way, right? Like this whole concept that we can't teach the actual history of our nation is because they want people and they're banking on people to not know this information. So yes, to everything that is going on. I mean, it's just so powerful. Thank you, Freddie, for sharing your story. But again, Dr. Opara, just to uplift your viewpoint, all of this interconnects. And if we don't see how the interdisciplinary work and taking a village to try to dismantle the system is the way that we have to do it, if we don't see that, then we're missing all of the marks.
100%. 100%. Thank you, brother. And the piece that really sticks with me, I mean, everything you said, like, yes. And y'all throw out your emojis. That's another thing we do up in here. We love some emojis. And I just want to, first of all, shout out Sister Bruna. Giovanni, I see you, sis. And I will call you in a bit. We just kind of have a roundtable conversation, then we open up for the community. So don't you worry, I see your request and you will be up on stage very soon. And same thing to everybody, we will just a couple more questions and then we'll open up. And so definitely get your reflections, thoughts, ideas, questions together. We really want to hear from everybody. With that being said, Brother Brian, I just appreciate everything that you said. And if I were to unpack, that would be like a whole other 10 minutes. I just want to pull out this one thing because it's something my father recently reminded me of, and I couldn't help but just be like, wow. we know this, but sometimes it just bears repetition. And he said, Ijoma, they know what to do. When you say they, he mean white folks. They know what to do. They know. They know. They choose not to do it. There is an unwillingness to do it because why? Why would you divest of power? Why would you divest of convenience? Why would you divest of comfort? You know, and this idea of ignorance is not real. Is not real. That every time I discover things like this, was it Lyndon Johnson? Was he the one that said, and I have to Google it so I can say it correctly, but I think the phrase was, if you want to, I'm going to paraphrase. This is my paraphrase, but y'all that, you brilliant researchers in the space, go ahead and find it and DM it to me, and so I can put it on the Jumbotron. But it was the saying that you can get a white man to do anything if you just can't convince him that he's better than the next colored man. And he literally, said colored man. And I'm going to try to find, while Brother Freddy is talking in a bit, the actual quotations. But it is that sense that there is an intentional design of the system that we live in. So pretending that folks are ignorant and things are just happening is doing a huge disservice. And it is true complicity. We have to approach these issues like it is known. And it's just a question of the lack of willingness, because money is on the line, power is on the line, comfort and convenience are on the line. And when we pretend that those are not real, again, as byproducts of white supremacy or white supremacism, and when we pretend that these are not real, we are contributing to the non-solving of these problems, the further throwing away trillions of dollars that the US has spent on so-called treatment so far. And the gap is still widening. It doesn't smell right, like Black folks would say. Something don't smell right. Something don't smell right in the water, girl. And so I say this to say that yes and amen to what you said. There is a knowing and there is a knowledge in the production of this. And like you said, it is about mass incarceration. It is about locking Black people up. It is about the prison industrial complex. It is about these systems being grounded in slavery and slave patrols, right? Policing that then intersects with the educational institution, healthcare institutions, and the list goes on. And what does that look like? Okay. And so with that being said, I appreciate what you said. And I really want to come back to you, Brother Freddy. Brother Brian talked about anti-deficit approaches, right? This deficit base that we're all trained in academia, boy, is grounded in everybody. There's a gap, find it and publish on it. That's it. You don't got to do nothing about it. There's a gap. And it's the people's fault. That's how I trained. What's the gap? Where is the gap? Where is there something wrong with people? Find it, study it, publish it, get promoted. The end. Don't try to change nothing now. What you crazy? So it is definitely that deficit-based model. Medicine operates from the standpoint of deficit all the time. What is the risk? You're at risk. But who put you at risk? Right? And so it really does come down to what are the questions we're asking. And so, Brother Freddy, I want to ask you, as we sort of shine the light a little bit closer in your story, and you started to talk about your experience during treatment and how it was unsatisfactory. And we have studies, I mentioned a few, that has shown exactly that aligns with exactly your experience, that the satisfactory nature or experiences that we have when we're in these treatment facilities or centers or settings or what have you, experiences are very, very low. And so you talked about that and also mentioned that deficit base. And if you can just unpack it a little bit, what other examples can you share around the ways that your experience was not trauma informed, was not asset based, it was deficit based, and frankly was anti-Black?
Well, first of all, I'm writing 2 books right now. I'm writing a book on the treatment system and how it's despicable. Let me give you an example. First of all, one of the things that they say in treatment is, only 1 out of 10 of you are going to make it. What's going to make you different from the other people? Why are you bragging about how your system fails to heal people? That's number one. Number two, imagine going to the doctor, right? And you have a cough. and he gives you a cough syrup and says, well, out of 1 out of 10 people, this works. Why would you take that? That's criminal that they get away with it. But you know why they keep getting away with it? Profit over people. Let me give you an example. Do you know how many times that I got into a treatment facility and my first view of dealing with people, right? It wasn't, hi, welcome to our treatment center. Hi, do you need a shower? Hi, how are you hungry? Do you have parents? How many times you been locked up? Where are your parents from? How long you been smoking crack? Why are you assuming all that? Oh, I know why you're assuming all that, because you look at me and I'm black. There's no other way to look at it. You know how I know that's right? Because when I asked my other white partners that were in there, they didn't go through that same experience. Let me give you another example that's happened to me a whole bunch of times. I'm in group. Everybody in group is white. The counselor's white. The psychiatrist is white. I get done. They say, Freddie, why don't you share your experience? Why don't you talk about the stuff where you're at? Why would I feel comfortable sharing my experience in this room where everybody's from the same background, everybody's talking the same type of language, and I feel different? I already suffer from low self-esteem. You know how I know that? Because people that love themselves do lovable things. Using drugs and alcohol is not a lovable thing imputing in my body. It's poison. So that's why I'm here to be treated. So no, I don't feel comfortable sharing my story. You know what they'll say to me? This has happened to me multiple times. I can't even believe I'm even talking about it. Well, Freddie, I listen to G Unit. Freddie, I'm down with the brothers. Freddie, I listen to rap music. You know, we got fried chicken on the menu. Like, these are the things that I went through going through the treatment center since the age of 9 years old. And you know what's even more sicker? And I want to get back to this. Now that I travel this country by God's grace and mercy, and I speak at schools and treatment centers, the thing that gets me when I go back, they want me to do it for free. So wait a minute, let me make sure I understand this. Y'all treat me like trash. I change my life. I get better due to angels in the system, not the system, because they always say, Freddie, the blacks need to be more like you. Freddie, you're an example. If you just work hard, if you just put your nose to the grind. How about how many people have supported and uplifted me? And how about the angels in the system, in a system that wasn't created to help a brother like me? How about them people that uplifted me? I didn't do this just based on intelligence. I did this because people opened doors that previously were not open for me, and they advocated me and they fought for me. But anyway, let me go back to my point. Imagine being a person that has come into a system for care. I came here because I was eating out of a dumpster. I was homeless. I got spit on. I got a racial epithet. I literally remember getting in the dumpster, opening up, and the maggots running through that. I remember that. I remember the smell of the dumpster. I remember being spit on. I remember waking up next to the dumpster and the mice running over me. I remember going through my sexual trauma and being bullied for years. I remember all that. I ain't never forgot. That's why I'm in therapy now. Okay. And then you get to a place that is designed and they tell you and they market, we're here to help you. We got yoga and swimming pools and food and all this other stuff. And you get in there and the first thing is you're black. Not you're human. Not you're here to get care. You're black. And you being black, all right now, there's a certain way you got to walk in this building. Certain way you got to be in this building. You ain't here to change policy. You're here. This is what we're giving you. So let me tell you how sick it is. I'm in treatment. The whole building. Nobody looks like me except for a tech, except for a cafeteria worker. And do you know how many times then people have said to me, hey man, when you get out here, yo, you gotta really work hard and you gotta really connect with people because we don't have the same opportunities they got. That taught me how racist the world is. When I'm sitting next to somebody who is a different color than me with the same issue, but yet they got an easier path than I do, not based on any resume, not based on nothing, but because of the fact that I was born black. People have no idea what that feels like to sit in treatment and know the person sitting next to you gonna have it better than you based on your skin color. And no matter what I say in these groups, no matter what I do, no matter what happens, don't nobody in here come look like me. The speakers they bring in here, they don't look like me. The administrators, they don't look like me. What if I want to be a counselor? What if I want to be a psychiatrist? Why would I think I could be that when I'm looking up and none of them look like me? Oh, and by the way, I'm not mad at the counselors that said that to me and said that we like G Unit and chicken. What I'm mad at is HR that put you in that position. Who is doing the hiring around here that would allow somebody like you to be working in this building? Baby, this ain't meant for you. They're telling people that you got fried chicken on the menu. And you know what's crazy? I really believe that she meant well. because I know in my heart that she obviously comes from a place where that type of language and vocabulary is normal. Oh, by the way, let me tell you this, what I go through. Outpatient, which is a crime in itself. I can't tell you how many times I've been at an outpatient facility, and every single one of the counselors, psychiatrists, when I ask them, do they have sources or things for me to read or listen to, every author, every source, everything they always provide is non-Black. You're not going to give me no scholar that writes books about this stuff. You're not going to show me anything about my goodness. And listen, I'm a Christian, very flawed one. I love all people. But what I'm saying is, why is it when it comes to healthcare and getting better, you're always making us more obstacles? And then you ask, how come people like you don't get sober? Why would we? Why would we feel like when we come in here that we got a chance? Why would I feel like that when I come in this building, y'all care about me, when 90% of this building don't care if I get well, and honestly, they don't want me to get well? That's my experience.
Mm, mm, mm. Whew, I just wanted to sit with that. I think all of us, and y'all, please give Brother Freddie some love. Just put some hearts out up there, and because my heart just fell listening to you. I have uh, some experiences that align with that. Not exactly in those in terms of the nature of what the elements of your experience, but the underlying obtuse whiteness. I call it obtuse whiteness. A white supremacy culture that it permeates the institution that is unchecked, and then the whiteness of the individuals that are not required to go through cultural humility training that is ongoing and continuous and not one time, and pairs with institutional cultural humility. And the two Black women that created the framework of cultural humility, Dr. Garcia and Dr. Melanie Teravon, and Dr. Jean Garcia, both Black women, both pediatricians. Them two women, there are three levels to cultural humility, or three aspects of cultural humility. And one of those aspects is institutional accountability, because it's clear that you can't implicit bias, train people to death and not, address the institutional drivers and producers and reproducers of that bias, right? That are rooted in white supremacism and anti-Black racism. You can't, like, that's not a thing. It's just simply not. It is at least performative and at most just grossly terroristic. Okay. And so and frankly violent, and that's what came up for me as I was listening to you. And we have studies that show the alignment of mental health challenges. The ones I'm familiar with is in the child and adolescent space, when there is underrepresentation of people that look like children and adolescents in their spaces, primarily in education, but pretty much anywhere they are. There is a linkage to mental health, to depression and suicidality and anxiety, etc. Seeing people that reflect us is critical for us as people surviving white violence, in terms of our healing and our trauma informed and responsive care. Images and humans and communities of people, and those people also holding an approach that centers our experiences as Black people is also critical, right? And that those that are not in Black bodies but are taking care of Black folks, ensuring that they are subjected to that they undergo continuous, I don't even call it education, I call it straight up socialization and conditioning and programming that is anti-racist. Okay, continuously, because that virus of whiteness, that bad boy, just sticks in the system. It's like herpes. It just, you get the infection and boom, for life. So you have to be continuously taking what I call, prophylaxis, honey, in terms of, anti-Black prophylaxis continuously. And if you're not, then you are perpetuating your default programming, which is whiteness and white supremacism. And sometimes that's in Black bodies. I mean, in white body, a lot of times, most of the times in white bodies, but sometimes it's even in Black bodies, because we're trained and socialized in these same systems. So I just want to appreciate that, just that, how it is violent when our systems don't organize themselves around these principles. And I want to also lift up this concept of self-love, which really touched me. And with that, thank you so much, Brother Freddie. Brother Brian, did anything you hear touch you that Brother Freddie shared? And I also want you to go into, because of the work you do in school, the school system, how do institutions like the school system, the educational system, interact or intersect with what Freddie's talking about? How do these institutions, which, because Freddie is talking about a system, the mental health care system. Now let's talk about the school system, right? And how these systems, and I can add for the healthcare system, I hopefully I've been peppering that in throughout this conversation, reinforces many of these same issues, because they are themselves an outgrowth and are part and parcel of this system of white supremacism that we're talking about. They're not separate from, they're part and parcel, they're an outgrowth of these systems where we trace the history into the present. And so in what ways are you seeing the educational system participating in a similar way that Freddie's talking about? And in what ways do you see opportunity for change through the educational system, if that's even possible? But go ahead, first of all, and react to what you heard, brother.
Well, so again, there's a lot there, but I think the first question that you had was, well, what did I react from? What can I take away from Freddie's story, from what he just shared? And I think for me, all of it. I mean, I'm over here, multitasking, doing dishes, cleaning the house, and I'm hearing the story. And in every single point that he's making, talking about his trajectory, talking about his life path, I'm like, wow. Like I just continuously say, wow. Like it's, and I say that because I think what's beautiful about it, even though it is trauma based and founded in trauma, I think there's a beauty to it in that he's trying to use this story to help other people, right? And these are the types of narratives that we need to hear, considering I don't think a lot of people talk about it enough. And I don't think a lot of people, because they're not afflicted or impacted or have someone in their family that's impacted or afflicted, don't think about it, at the forefront of their minds. When you're hearing the stories of how he was in these centers and he's not seeing anyone who represents him in the counselors, is not seeing anyone who had, in the speakers that they bring in the administrators, the resources that he has provided, and the question really that really got to me was, he's like, then people wonder why we don't get, rehabilitated. Why would we? Right? That's so powerful because again, people don't talk about it. Right. And so, yeah, it's just all of it. And I can't thank him enough for being so vulnerable, open, honest, raw, and transparent in this space, because, it's hard. It's hard to be able to tell these stories, but these are the stories that people need to hear. I keep on thinking about it in terms of like, this is Humans of New York, like very style, very impactful anecdotal experiences that can have long-term implications of people having that aha moment. And I think from an education standpoint, it's, for me, what I really always am drawn to is this concept of pedagogy, right? How we train, how we facilitate, how we think about, explaining this to other folks, specifically people who are staff members, and explain to them. I love what you said, Dr. Opara, that, you can't have an implicit bias training and that be the end of it. There's so many, either unbeknownst to them or they mean well, but I think even people who have good intentions that want to create a diversity, equity, and inclusion training and want to say, let's do an implicit bias microaggression training for 3 hours, that's not all the story, right? For me, in my perspective, being someone who, I work in housing, but part of my collateral position, I'm the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion lead. And I think for me, my charge that I've been leading and creating the initiatives has been to get people away from the concepts of just these 4-hour modules that are one specific topic, and let's open up and talk about so many different, needs based on demographic data, right? For instance, at Montclair State University, when I was a grad student, when I created a conference for them, I said, let's look at the data. You have your Hispanic serving institution, your students are Latino identifying. Let's create sessions that talk to students who are going to be referral sources for them on how to interact, engage, and give resources to those students. You have a big first generation student population. Why are we not talking about bringing in a panel to really inform students on like, okay, what is this experience? Have actual first generation students there to speak on their experience and what they wish they had when they went to college, when they were going through the systems that, you know, all too often we don't think about. You know, students who are food insecure, why don't we talk about and bring in our food pantry experts, you know, and bring them in here and have a conversation about the data that they've acquired, how they actually ask the questions about low income, low socioeconomic status, because you can't just go up to somebody and say, are you poor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need, you know, go to the food pantry, because there's such a stigma to it. And even if they do need it, they're not going to go because there's such a negative stigma to it. So I think to answer your question in a very short way, to continue this conversation, is I think it takes, again, like we're saying, a village, people who understand, who are committed to lifelong learning, and who are going to continuously update themselves on the current information. Like, for instance, doing the what is it called? The people call it different things, but the oppressive walk, where people like are standing all in one line and step forward if you had healthcare when you were a kid, step backward if you had this. That, at one point, it was a great exercise to show people about privilege, the privilege walk. A lot of people, you know, had that. With new knowledge and information and updated resources and materials, we now know that activity does more harm than good, right? And so it's just little things like that where we have to consistently do the work, get updated on the current information, and just do better as scholar affair practitioners and people in the medical field in all different realms of life. Because again, it's going to take a village.
Let me hit on that real fast. So thank you, brother Brian, for sharing, because I want to share this. So by God's grace and mercy, I got asked to keynote the National Institute of Staff and Development. For those who don't know, in education, that's a big community conference, community college conference in education, like the biggest one on the planet. Okay. I'll never forget when a guy reached out to me. He said, look, we normally do not have undergraduate speakers. We never had an undergraduate be a keynote at our event. I said, so why are you asking me? He said, a speaker of your ilk and your story is what we need. We normally have government officials, you know, PhDs, masters. I want to be clear about something, especially in the education space. And Brian will know this. Every conference I've ever been a keynote, I have been the lowest degree in the room. I had a lady tell me this one time, I'll never forget. It was in my first national conference. It was my first national conference. It was Baltimore. I was in this room with provosts and all these people and the murder status, all this. Okay. This lady told me, she said, young man, what are you doing keynoting and you don't even have your doctorate yet? The reason I'm sharing this story with y'all is that the way education is set up in this most of the world, in my experience, you're not brought in to speak based on your resume. I mean, based on your ability. You're not brought on to speak based on how much you can uplift. You're not brought in to speak based on the fact that you can change the way students see college and get them to walk a different way, and with the pedagogy piece and all that. You're brought in based on resume. The problem with doing that is that just because my resume is good doesn't mean I'm a good person. And it doesn't mean that your school's going to be uplifted. It doesn't mean that your student body is going to get better. It doesn't mean that your policies are going to change. What it does mean is I'm getting a check based on my resume. And I'm not saying every speaker that got a good resume is bad, but what I am saying is that's the problem. I think it's absolutely criminal that all of a sudden now we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Why are we paying people to be nice? Why do I have to pay you to go to a diversity conference to teach you to be nice? This is the easiest money ever made. I get paid to do professional development across the country. You know what they're paying me to do? To talk about how other people helped me and did right by me. Why do we have to pay people to tell other people, act right? If he's black, treat him right, just like you would treat him if he was white. So Brian hits a big point about education. It is despicable how we act. And I wouldn't have knew this until I became a speaker. How we act about who we put in front of our students. And you know why they do that? Because we got to keep the golden goose churning. We can't have too many like your kind up here, because guess what? Some people might not like that, and our retention might go down. And if our retention goes down, that means our bottom line is protected. So I want to make sure I hit that.
Speaking facts. And I want to say this, just to piggyback off that.
Thank you. And this is our space. It's our space. And so I appreciate you, what you said, Brother Freddie, Brother Brian. And I mean, whew, ah, ah, woo, yeah. Uh, I think we might just want to go ahead and open it up, because I mean, if I get started, you already know y'all will have to cancel all your evening plans. Um, yeah, yeah. Who is considered an expert? Who is the expert, right? Who gets to be paid the big bucks? Who is invited to the conference? Who is the visiting professor, right? Who gets to publish or not? Ah, I mean, if I were to go into it right now, and all the layers you just unpacked right there, right? And I would just hit the bottom line to say that we need to be clear that our institutions within these here divided states of America, are part and parcel of a white supremacist machine, of an anti-black machine, because that's how it was designed. Black people were not supposed to be running around here free and irresponsible, right? Like, what was that about? Okay, now that we don't, for whatever reason, we've decided, okay, we don't need their servitude, can we get them on the boat and ship them back to Africa? And that didn't work. And ever since, it's been one thing after the other. And so the point here is that our institutions were built on backs, and y'all can always check out your school, your organization, your wherever you work at, study at, whatever, serve at, volunteer at. There you could go to your local library or even that institution's library and read about how that place came to be, the land that is on. We are all part and parcel of an ongoing settler colonial like state, right? And a system built on stolen land and stolen bodies, stolen minds, stolen, attempted stolen souls, but never that. And so it is so important that the ways in which that we are reviewing our processes, our policies, our practices, from who we invite into the classroom, who we invite to the grand rounds, who we invite to the lecture series, the brown bag, who we ask to be on this committee or that committee, who we're recruiting to come join us as staff or student or faculty or what have you, or worker, whatever the institution, because we're trans professional here. So whatever your field is, who is considered the expert? And then how do we express value to them? Do we compensate them? And how do we do that? And how do we engage in those conversations? How do we review our very things that we do, from the classroom, from the workspace to the C-suite, as through the lens of anti-racism, through the lens of abolition, through a trauma-informed care, through a historical lens, through asking ourselves the question, wait a minute, is this culturally responsive and affirming? Wait a minute, who is being centered? I really love, Brother Brian, that you brought up that privilege walk. That is the best, one of the best, one, there are many, unfortunately, but one of the best examples of, good intentions sending you straight to hell. Meaning the best and just effing it up. Why? Because of what again, if you're ever confused as to why something just ain't right, ask yourself the question, where is errant, irresponsible whiteness happening? That is really the bottom line, right? Who is being centered? When I do an exercise like this, it may feel like a good idea, but who is being centered? Who is being protected? And who is being harmed or hurt or injured? It all comes down to the questions we're asking ourselves, whether we're in the school system, whether we're in the healthcare system, whether we're in the food system, agriculture, nursing, pharmacy, social work. Honey, name your field, honey, that field. You're in the glass making system, honey. Okay. What is your system? What are the questions that are being asked? Who is being centered? Are we defaulting to the default, and the default is white supremacism or an anti-blackness? Or are we needing to be intentional, because it does require intentionality in asking and answering questions as you create programs, initiatives, policies, you're creating, you're designing your studies, you're engaging in whatever. Who is being centered? Who is being hurt or harmed? Who is being lifted up? So I appreciate, I mean, the levels there, and you bring it down to the speakers and the compensation piece. We're gonna have to have a whole talk. That's gonna be a separate round table. So listen, this is gonna be the last question, and we already have people coming up on stage. I want to welcome Dr. Drew. Thank you so much for being here. I want to welcome Sister Bruna Giovanni. I am trying to bring you up, and I don't know why it's not letting me do that. Oh, you can now speak. Great. Okay. And just lift up your hands. And everybody else that wants to speak, now is your time as we are rounding up with this last question. And so I want to delve into the lens of anti-racism and abolition. I want us to freedom dream a little bit here, okay? And I want to start off with a quote from an article that was written by Brother Abdullah Shehipad, called A Harm Reductionist Case for Abolition. A Harm Reductionist Case for Abolition. The link is in the Jumbotron, in the nest or dashboard or what have you. I want to start out with a quote from that article and allow us to freedom dream a little bit. And he says, excuse me, we face three overlapping crises: continued historic rates of largely preventable overdose deaths, the COVID-19 pandemic with inadequate government responses, and gratuitous anti-Black racism. Great fires have been sparked all across the United States, fueled by the righteous anger of the people. From the smoldering embers of the society of the old, we can fight for the world we want to see. We have a real opportunity to move harm reduction forward. Let us not hesitate. Let us call ourselves abolitionists. While we work to develop a world where these oppressive conditions no longer exist, continuing to rely on community for safety and care rather than the police will serve as harm reduction. This commitment to creating a non-carceral safe environment must be maintained as we fight for things that will actually reduce drug-related harms, which include a safe supply, safe consumption sites, unrestricted syringe access, and more. So my question to us is, end quote. So my question to us is, how do we freedom dream a substance use recovery future that is abolition informed and free of anti-Blackness, that is free of violent systems that are inherently violent and really geared towards criminalization, separating ourselves from the historical and ongoing effects of these policies that I named earlier, the so-called war on drugs, the so-called war on crime, right? The Anti-Abuse Act of 1986, Ronald Reagan's Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, and the list goes on, the 1914 Harrison Narcotic Tax Act, and there are so many examples, all which have ultimately served to exacerbate the criminalization of Black bodies, intersect capitalism with mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex, that shows up in the ways the language we use and our approaches to so-called care in our various institutions, whether it's healthcare, whether it's mental health and substance use, behavioral health care, whether it's the school system, whether it's on the street, wherever, right? And certainly in criminal justice. How do we freedom dream a substance use care and recovery experience for those of us in Black bodies, for those of us who are Black by politics and identity, baby, and royalty, honey. Okay, but what does it look like for us to be to experience recovery that is beautiful in Blackness, that centers our joy, our magic, our brilliance, our abundance, our assets, our strengths, our community, that looks ahead, that speaks about and develops tools that take into consideration the impact of structural racism and anti-Blackness in our lives, in our health, mentally, physically, access to opportunities and materials and wealth, that speaks about the ways that it also structures our access to healthcare and mental and recovery healthcare and behavioral healthcare as well, that makes us, that does not gaslight us, right? What does that look like? What are the things that need to happen from a policy standpoint, from a community level standpoint, from a cultural and individual standpoint? Let's start with you, Brother Freddie, and then we'll go to Brother Brian, and then we'll open up.
All right. So the first thing is we need to stop answering the shareholders. What do I mean by that? I got on the phone with people that invest in building rehab centers. And I told them my experience. It took years to get on this phone too. And they were in the room. And I will never forget, I told them my experience and the things I went through and things that need change and all this. And they said to me, and I couldn't believe it, my mouth dropped. They said, how does that help us from a business model standpoint? We got to stop looking at people as commodities and start looking at them as ways to make the planet better. That's issue one. The love of money is the root of this whole ignorance and racism. Issue one. Issue two, stop putting a Band-Aid as the number one cure when something needs surgery. Stop. What do I mean by that? Everybody's going crazy. Biden let all these people out over marijuana. He's trying to make it better. Okay, let me help you out. I'm not worried about people getting out. I'm worried about people not going back in. He could let out every single human being out of jail right now. But you know what the issue is? Over 90% of the district attorneys in this country are white. Has anybody ever thought that maybe the reason that we're disproportionately affected in the prison system is because the people that choose to put us in jail and they make the determination of the charges, what sticks, what doesn't, and they talk to the judges and hang out with the judges and cool with the judges, play golf with the judges, kids go to their schools. Have you ever thought that maybe that's a problem? Have you ever thought that maybe who's elected into positions to make things happen? Another issue. Why are we continually, America don't learn. Like, and when I say they don't learn, like, it's like this. I hear this all the time. Why can't black people just get over slavery? It was over 400 years ago. We can't get over slavery because we can't get over Jim Crow, because we can't get over the prison industrial system, because we can't get over education. Every time we're trying to get over something, y'all done something else. Like, my goodness. Like, how about this? Just wake up and do right. How about just like, look, we make this too theoretical. Go to write this APA paper that's 15 pages, and when you submit it to us, make sure the abstract is 120 words. Oh, and by the way, make sure you do the bibliography. Man, stop gatekeeping. How about this? You've been through something. You got an experience to share. I don't care what your resume look like. Come talk to us about how we can make it better. But you know how you would have to have that? You would have to have people in power that are built off care, that give a damn. I cannot believe one of the biggest things to me that really have hurt me is I cannot believe that people that work in education and medicine got into this worried about making money and not worried about trying to make the world better. It is baffling to me that people would choose a field like that where you serve and care solely based on financial and not based on uplifting and helping. We got to get back to, I don't even know if we were ever there, but we need to get to a place where, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Freddy. What's your name? I tell you what, we're all on the same rock floating through space. How about we come together as one and we try to make this place better? Not a theoretical 30-page APA paper that got to get published and got to go through this whole gauntlet with people that sit in a room and decide who gets it. Not all that mess, not all these degrees, not all that. Forget all that. Just the common decency of caring about the fellow human next to you. It's that simple. Pedagogy, retention, and theoretical. Man, all that mess. Bottom line means care. So what is my dream? That we care about one another. Have a society where love is at the forefront. Have a society where walking past somebody homeless bothers you. Have a society where if you see a person needing to walk through the door and they're not able to, you open the door open for them, you ask them how they're doing, you talk to them and see what you can learn from them. Damn! It's so cutthroat. And you know why it's cutthroat? White supremacy. It was made to be cutthroat. Capitalism. All these things was made to be like this way. That's my dream. Get to a society and care about one another more and stop being so selfish and stop being so rotten. That's where I'm at.
He said that's on period. He said that's on period. I need a human-centered society. I need a culture where people care about each other. Like Brother Cornel West says, justice is love practiced in public. And what does a love pedagogy look like? What does a love, system look like? I'm thinking about Paulo Freire's liberatory pedagogy or liberation pedagogy. Pedagogy, for those who may not know, is simply is a way of learning. Just how do people learn? Technically, it's how children learn, and andragogy is how adults learn. But we use pedagogy for everybody as a word. But Paulo Freire talks about a liberation pedagogy, which is very similar to an abolitionist pedagogy too, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, and this is what you said, right? And that's one of the most powerful questions we can ask as anti-racists, as abolitionists. Why this thing like this? Why? What function is it performing? Who is it benefiting? Again, it goes back to those questions that we're asking. You ask a good question, you get a good answer. You ask a question, then your answer is nothing and nonsense. So what are the questions we're asking, and ultimately, what is the function of these institutions? If it's to reinforce inequities, if it's to train students that will work for somebody else, to maintain the 1% holding the 99% and the 99% holding nothing, then yeah, makes sense. All these things make sense because it's working towards an outcome, right? So it really goes back to what is the function of this thing. And like you said again, and like we've all said, the system is acting as designed. It's not broken. Don't approach it like you're approaching a broken object to fix. Approach it like we need to build a new effing system, right? Frankly speaking, because if this system is working the way it's supposed to work, we need a new one. And so I appreciate that feedback, and we begin to ask those questions. Well, what does love look like in the education space? What does love look like in healthcare? What does love look like in the food and agricultural space? What does it look like in fashion and clothing? What does it look like in textile? What does it look like in economics? What does it look like in housing? What does it look like and the list goes on and on in a so-called justice system? What does love look like? What does humanism, and humanity look like? And those are very key questions. And what each and every single one of us can ask ourselves and answer is, what does it look like in my practice? As a physician, me asking myself, Ijoma, Dr. Parr, what does it look like in your practice as you engage with your patients? What does it look like as you engage with your trainees, your resident physicians and medical students and other health professional students you teach? What does it look like when you're engaging in advocacy and you're organizing around reproductive justice, right? What does it look like when you're engaging on social media, on platform, when you're hosting AIM Art? What does love look like? These are key questions I need to ask and continue to ask, myself. How am I centering a liberation mindset, right? How am I centering a liberation philosophy? How am I centering abolition in my work? And so each and every single one of us can ask ourselves those questions and answer it and attempts to answer it. And sometimes that answer is going to be right away. And sometimes it's going to be over the course of a week, sometimes a month, a year, 10 years. But the first step is to ask the question. The answers will come and might evolve. But you got to start with the question. Brother Freddy, you're amazing, outstanding. And shout out to Brother Brian, who had to step away. Thank you for his gift of time and really appreciate him. Now we are opening up to the community to hear your feedback. What is your experience? What are your thoughts? What landed for you as you listen to this conversation? What are some things? Again, this is by no means an exhaustive, comprehensive treatment of the subject. I'm sure you understand. We're sharing resources so that we can continue that work on our own, but we got to at least start having the conversation, right? And with that, we can build from there and keep coming back to it regularly. So I want to, welcome folks to the stage. And if you have something to say and offer, please lift up your hands. We're going to end at 3 on the dot, baby, because your girl she's working on the time management. And so with that, we're going to start with my one and only sister, the Dr. Michelle Drew. Okay. And then from there, we're going to go to Bruna Giovanni. Can't wait to hear from you. And there's a couple more people. So I expect for you to lift up your hand soon. But Dr. Michelle, welcome, yo. I'm so glad the bail worked and you got released from Twitter jail, baby.
Hey, how about that? How about that? I got put in Twitter prison on the very first day that Elon Musk owned it. So, I must be doing something right.
Oh.
The irony that a Black evangelical got put on in Twitter timeout for defending a white trans woman is not lost on me.
Interesting.
Interesting, right? Against conservatives, but that's okay. I just really wanted to thank you for this space. I was so excited when I saw you post it this week, and then I was in Twitter prison, and I didn't know if I'd be able to be here. So first of all, just lifting up the ancestors for getting me.
I was about to say that. Yep. Thank you to the ancestors for bailing you out.
Yeah. And this resonated with me because I don't, many people know me. I'm a certified nurse midwife. I'm also a family nurse practitioner. I'm a political organizer in the community. But one of my very first jobs in healthcare, and it's something that has continued to impact my practice, was that I was a nurse in West Baltimore during the height of, the heroin epidemic there, but only nobody knew that there was an opioid epidemic in the 90s because apparently it was only a problem for Black people. And so we struggled. We went around with very little and somehow managed to get a lot done at a free clinic in Baltimore. And our biggest ally was one of the psychiatrists at University of Maryland, long before the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion, where because of that wonderful rule that people who had a, quote, mental illness back then could be on Medicaid and stay on Medicaid, he was very interested and really talked about what today we call co-occurring disorders, long before anybody else thought about it. And so he would make sure that many of our clients that were unhoused or unstably housed, male and female, would be diagnosed with a co-occurring disorder as well as their addiction. And he would keep them on 5 milligrams of methadone forever or some small dose of whatever, just to make sure that they kept their Medicaid. Because he knew that if he ever said that, these poor Black people in a city no one cared about had reached recovery and had reached a space of mental health and wellness, the system would throw them away. And so I've always worked with mostly Black people who have struggled with opioid use disorder or other substance use disorders. And I still to this day have. I became a buprenorphine prescriber as a nurse practitioner the first opportunity I could. And out of Ubuntu, which is a reproductive health space, I started treating pregnant women with opioid use disorder. And
that's amazing.
It was do catch as catch can with whatever resources we can. And then one day, white women discovered oxycodone. And then they discovered heroin when oxycodone wasn't as accessible. And now they've discovered fentanyl. And so, when I tell you that I have struggled for 33 years to try to help mostly women, because that is where my practice has been. But also, since I am a family nurse practitioner, I'm able to get access to their partners and their children. And, I'll help anybody. I don't care. To me, what resonates is, as broken as a system is, how all of a sudden, when I've been struggling and begging for years to get help for women and other people that were pregnant or capable of pregnancy with substance use disorder and got ignored, now all of a sudden there is money overflowing. And I mean millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions. But where is it all putting in the resources? So for me, abolition looks like still bringing Black liberation unapologetically into my practice. I'm one of the only, I am I believe I'm the only Black MAT prescriber in the entire state, and one of few that are people of color. Most of those are South Asian, and working in one of our larger health systems. But most of the providers are white, even those that helped me get as far as I've gotten this far. But what abolition looks like to me is that of the 16 women that I have that are currently pregnant with substance use disorder on my panel, 10 of them are Black, 2 of them are other people of color, and only 4 are white. When everywhere else in the state, 90% of the people who are receiving resources for opioid use disorder are white. And it's interesting here you talk about housing in college, because now I have clients, and most of my white clients, they are being offered housing, they're going to Mommy and Me, long-term sobriety, they're getting free job training, free education, everything you want and need to help you not only deal with your addiction, but to help lift you out of this terrible place that clearly you don't belong in, because you are a white woman with a mental health or a brain chemistry disorder. But, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, nobody wanted to help me do the same thing for all the quote Black pregnant junkies that I had. And the fact that, and one of the ways that it impacts my practice is I just stay in trouble. I'm currently in trouble with the medical industrial complex because I routinely refuse to do drug screens on my patients. If they want to do a drug screen to prove that they're sober as some sort of incentive, great, but I will still prescribe for them without. And I also do not routinely, and in fact, rarely, in fact, never have I called CPS on any one of my clients in recovery because they were struggling with sobriety, as long as I knew that they and their kids were safe. So that's kind of where I'm at, and enjoying music and sunshine and just Black liberation and Twitter liberation all on this beautiful Saturday.
I'm loving
thank
it.
You again.
No, thank you. Thank you for all your work. You are amazing, y'all. Sister Michelle is everything. She's the co-founder and director of Ubuntu Black Family Health Center. She does outstanding, amazing work. And thank you for showcasing examples that we all can be leaders in a liberation-centered practice. I love that because, again, you say you don't do drug screens. Now, somebody may be like, well, but what if they are? But again, is that the question, right? Is that the question? Or is the question, like I always ask, who is being excluded by that policy? What is going to be the function of this policy? Is this policy going to be so that I can now further participate in shaming and blaming? Pardon me, I'm getting a call. Is this policy so that I can participate in shaming and blaming and further excluding people that need treatment, knowing fully well that relapse is part of recovery, right? It's part of the cycle of recovery. Is that what's going to be the function of it? Is that going to be the outcome? Or is it truly to ensure that we are, again, participating in harm reduction and that we are really being oriented towards ultimately recovery, right? As defined by the people involved. You talked about CPS. Dr. Dorothy Roberts has done beautiful work, and a number of other people, as to how CPS, is basically like another arm of the police, right? And how it has unfortunately worked towards the detriment of Black families. It's a great book. I'm going to look for it and post it in a bit. But again, really asking ourselves different questions and being intentional rather than just kind of going with the flow. But what am I doing? Why am I doing? Pardon me. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how, at the end of the day, who is it benefiting and who is it harming or injuring or exacerbating trauma? So I just want to thank you for that. And again, reminding us that the system is not broken, right? Because when they want it to work for the right people, baby, it starts to work like clockwork. You'd be like, wait a hot second. So again, it's that perfect example, the reaction to the crack epidemic that was manufactured and created, and then the reaction to the opioid epidemic and how that's different, right? So the system is working as designed. So I appreciate that. Bruna Giovanni, you're welcome to this space. Please talk your talk.
Hey, hello, Doctor ICO.
It's okay. You could just say opera. It's fine. Opera.
Sorry,
You're fine.
like I know it's kind of weird because like my people are African too, so it's like I'm not. I butch African names so bad, but like with my colleagues, I just thank you first for hosting the space and just giving me the mic to speak. And I also want to say thank you to Ms. Michelle for your love and your compassion towards your patients and your people in care. And I accidentally, if you're seeing me put a heart while you're speaking, like saying that, like the sad story, like like an accident, like press
Thank you.
The crime, but like just clarify so that if you thought maybe I was loving the pain that people were going through, just to clarify that it was an accident, me press the heart emoji. So
thank you.
And also I want to say thank you to Freddy for being so strong, so brave and resilient, coming out and like basically building yourself up. Trust me, I understand how hard it is. Building yourself up. Like, I think you're asking very, in a lot of African countries, you can get penalized of either going to jail or like either going to jail or like even sometimes they'll even give you capital punishment if you show any signs of LGBTQIA plus. So I grew up the first part of my childhood, like it was just normal to me. Like my mom was nice. It's a bit nice to me. She let me play with some Barbies. I always preferred to play with Barbies and everything. And sometimes it hurts me when people say, "Oh, probably." And when I ask, well, how did that I came out this way when I was in a very homophobic country, and if anything, I was actually groomed, quote unquote, groomed around Islam and Christianity. And in fact, my mom even told me I would have had an Arabic name had I just born a female. So I'm just like, I'm just like, how do you explain that? And then people try to gaslight me and say, oh, no, that's not true, which is why it completely breaks my heart when I hear people saying, oh, some quote unquote agenda that's being pushed on young kids, you're sexualizing the kids, and it's like, no, and it's like, I was even able to open up in another space last night, and I also opened up again to a mom, like she was, she actually told me that a trans son, basically, her son was born a female, and later came out to her, and then she, um, she was like just opening up to me about it and her journey with her child and everything. And I was literally crying to her, and I was like, ma'am, I just want to say, the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old is me that never got to eat off this stuff at an early age. Like, it's Christ, and thanking you right now for loving and embracing your child and letting them be a true, authentic self from an early age, which is why I get very emotional when I hear people even, because how, growing up being looked at by adults, I used to be bullied by adults, like I used to have like adults even pull my hair as a child, and I was, it hurts me when I see like adults actually bullying kids, like Gabrielle Union. I'm sure if you guys watch Black movies and stuff like that, and like you would know who Gabrielle Union is. I'm not sure, but he has a step like it's like it's not a biological child, but step child who is transgender, and I was like when I was looking through the pictures of Thea, like she's called Thea now. Thea, I was just looking and I was like, oh my gosh, I was crying looking at those pictures, and I was like, I would commented it in one text, and I was like, me looking at the child can see themselves from A14. I am so proud. This child is beautiful. I'm so thankful to Gabrielle Union for letting her child be the affecting stuff and loving her child and creating her child. I'm so thankful to Gabrielle Union for that.
And I agree with you. And I completely agree with you with that. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you, sis, on that. And Gabrielle Union and her family being a great example of that kind of love. And I appreciate you so much taking the time to join us on this space and sharing your story. You're just, we could just tell the love you have, and you're so kind in your remarks towards me. But I mean, we could hear the love you have in your heart as well, and that is just beautiful. And I also appreciate you coming up too, because you reminded us to always lift up the intersectionality in this conversation, right? Like we know from studies that our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters and siblings experience actually higher rates of disparities when it comes to substance use and addiction, as part of, again, the mental health strain of holding multiple marginalized identities in an intersectionally oppressive world, right? So not only do we have to deal with white supremacism, we're also dealing with sexism and patriarchy. We're also dealing with homo and transphobia. We're also dealing with, and then when you throw upon that disability, ableism, and Islamophobia, xenophobia, and the list goes on. So I just want to name that. Thank you so very much for you just lending your voice to this conversation and being so patient in doing that, so that we remember that it is so critical to this conversation to include the impact of multiple identities and intersectional systems of oppression that intersect with this issue of substance use disorder, addiction, as well as recovery and treatment. So I appreciate you. Freddie, is there anything you want to say to what our lovely sis offered? And then we will close up the space.
No, I just want to tell her thank you. Like, it takes courage and it takes guts to share the stuff that she shared, because the reality of it, it is absolutely criminal the way we treat our brothers and sisters who are not what we think they should be, or who identify different. It's foul, it's wrong, and it's hurtful. And you can hear the pain in her voice, and the fact that she's willing to share that. And as a person that's been through pain and trauma, because you know we all get a free prescription of pain if you're born on this planet. For her to be able to share that, bless you and thank you. Mic drop.
Mic drop. Absolutely. And, it reminds me again, as we wrap up this conversation, thank you to everybody. But it reminds me of what you said about love, right? Do we have a politics of love? Do we have a practice of love? Do we have a philosophy, a pedagogy of love? And love also needs to take into consideration that we're taking care of folks that may have different identities from us, but they're still our Black siblings. They're still members of our Black family, and we love them unconditionally. And so what does that look like? And how intentional are we being in our practice to ensure that we are centering that? Sister Ada Bamboo, listen, it's only because of jollof rice I'm going to allow you 1 minute to talk. I've been talking. I'm saying you people should please request to speak, but we are going to close on time. And now you have brought your spirit now, and because I can't say no to you. So you see the problem. So I'm going to give you 1 minute, my sister, to speak, and then we are going to close. Please, it's because of your jollof rice. That's the only reason. Okay, come on up and talk your talk in 1 minute, my dear sister. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sister Ada.
Man, sister, I love all of you so much, so much. That's why I came. I said, oh my God, it was 11 o'clock. We have a conference next week, and I am one of the speakers. We talk about Africa with the community here in California, and I was calling. It's morning for me, but I want just to say, what you guys are saying is so true. It's so true. We were talking last time about the paper bag test. Right? When in the same family you have people with different skin tone, and when you are either here in the United States, you are the good person. When you are darker, etc. I don't know sometimes what happened to us. I say, why we ask for violence with each other, right? But we can just say, I love you. Just I love you. How are you doing? It's so positive when we say that. And rather than looking for the negativity in people, look what is positive, because we are all human. Like my daughter said, you are human. You are human. Teenager. Meaning, thank you so much for being here. I couldn't join earlier, but let's put our energy, help each other, lift our spirit, see the beauty of our skin, the beauty of who we are, because the battle is not us. The battle is outside. When you go out of your house, you have the microaggression every single minute. And you have to explain every single minute. You have to learn from other people every single minute. You even have to learn their language every single minute. Like right now, I'm fighting to bring African language in California. They have 25 languages that they are translating for anything that you want to learn, including the Department of Health. I stepped in their mouth and I said, what about the African language? What about Haitian Creole? We are here, they are here, right? Meaning for me, it's like, let's push ourselves in a way that we are sitting at the table. I don't want to be on the menu anymore. I don't want some people to tell my story. I can tell my story myself. And I gravitate between Latino. Last time in a conference, they said, oh, can you write your question in the speech? I said, no, in the
chat.
In the chat. I said, no, I don't need you to babysit me. I can speak by my own, first of all. Second, when you need me to be an ally for you, you let me speak. And you tell my story to the city hall and you tell it to Gavin Newsom in Los Angeles here, the governor. But when I have to speak, you ask me if I can put it on the chat. No, I won't do that. Really, we have to start questioning the people. We start to rise and questioning them and push doors and tell them, hey, I am here. If I'm invisible, I will be visible. But love each other. Love each other. I love you guys.
And we love you. And we love you at that. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I mean, to just share space with you. And I love everyone here, and I know you all love each other. And so as we wrap up, in summary, thank you, Brother Freddie. Thank you, Brother Brian, in absentia, just for the gems that you dropped today. Sister Bamboo said it, yo, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that is just an outstanding just reminder. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because at the end of the day, these conversations have to lead to action. That's why we're the Anti-Racism Medicine Action Roundtable, honey. And those actions, I know many of you have exactly done that. You've taken these conversations to city government. We have Dr. Day here in the house, who has used these conversations and made policy changes in the state of California when it came to monkeypox and other issues around medical education. You all take this work and you translate it to action. That's what's up, and that is love. That is love. And so what does it look like to address substance use and recovery through the lens of abolition and anti-racism, right? It is practicing a politics. It is practicing policies and putting together policies. It is executing practices that are rooted in love, in Black liberation. It is centering the social determinants of health, housing, food, education, employment, carceral exposure. It is always naming and centering and identifying, and then working to dismantle the delusional systems of white supremacism, how it impacts our communities and results in substance use and other addiction disease and conditions, right? It is and then also how it impacts our community's access to care, but also experience of care once we access it, right? It is being part and parcel of the solution when it comes to policies that produce just and equitable recovery and treatment resources, right? It is using language and attitudes to establish addiction and substance use disorder as a disease, as a public health crisis, not as a criminal issue, right? Right. That is what a love-centered, abolitionist oriented, anti-racist framework for this work can look like, right? It is working to decriminalize drugs, right? It is working to be intersectional, looking at these things through the intersectional lens to center true Black liberatory and justice frameworks in the systems that we work with, right? It is practicing Ubuntu. It is, and the Ubuntu is hard to love others when you don't love yourself. And Brother Freddie talked about this and how part of recovery, and I know this because I'm also in the 12 steps program, and part of it is also being able to understand self-love comes first. Like you love yourself, and then from there you grow out to love others. And so loving love is powerful, all right, and it is action oriented. Truly, it is justice in public. Okay, how do I see myself? Therefore, how do I see others? How am I asking the right questions of myself, and how am I asking that of others? So we got to love ourselves and love each other. That's why at the end of most of our meetings together, I'm like, hey, love each other, love yourself, and love each other, build community and build power. There is no power without community. There is no community without love. And there is no loving community without you loving yourself first. So that's why the first work of liberation, the first work of revolution, the first work of anti-racism is going through your own personal healing. That's why it's always step one is self, always. All right. And then with family. So with that, I want to end on a meditation. You are welcome to Naste. You're welcome to, head out and enjoy your day. I'm going to start this beautiful meditation. And then some music to finally end. The meditation is less than 15 minutes long. The whole thing is 15 minutes with some talking here and there, but the key of it is 15 minutes. So you are welcome to stay. You're welcome to head out. But I thought that this, speaking of self-love, will be an important practice for us to do. And then we'll just end with some music and close out. But our conversation at this moment has come to an end. And I thank you and I love you. Love yourselves, love each other, build community, and build power.